So we're doing, we've got a rough cut piece of sapele. It's 8/4, which is 2 inches thick. Like the wood lingo, when you're buying wood, it goes by quarters or 1/4 of an inch. So if you do 4/4, 1 inch, 8/4, 2 inch, 6/4, inch and a half. So this is 8/4, which puts it right about at 2 inches. Might be within an eighth of an inch, something like that. But it comes rough sawn. So we'll attach some videos, so we'll attach some photos to show you what it is. So rough sawn is basically they get the tree, cut it down, rip it down with a chainsaw, bandsaw, whatever they're using to do it, and it comes with all this texture on it. So you can feel like the difference.
I see it, yeah.
And then they cut it down to, it's not dimensional lumber, but they cut it down to whatever pieces they're going to use for that specific board. And then they do what's called skip planing, which basically you can see how it's different texture here versus here. So they run it through a planer that just until it just barely skips off the edge of it.
Oh, okay.
You can see. Turn this over. On the other side.
Oh yeah, it's way rough.
They just barely got it. Yeah. Just, so it just barely touched that side, and then they did this side. So that. Then you can see on the edges too. It's really rough. There's not much to it. So what we're gonna do today is a little bit of planning to figure out what we're gonna do with it. We're building a end table with a little bit of surprise. You can give a little bit of hint. I'm not gonna give you much more than that till the end. So stick around and watch it. You can put the puzzle together.
My OCD, you're like. Okay.
So basically what we're doing, are you done?
Yeah,
go ahead and put it together. We'll give you a minute.
No, I'm gonna just take them off. I'm gonna take them off, but I'm gonna put them all at the same. There we go. Okay.
OCD is strong in this one.
I'm curious.
It's a dark wood. Pencils don't really show up on it. You can kind of see it.
Okay, so
White crayons, just like walnut.
white crown.
So, you always want to inspect your wood.
Yes, you do.
So, I'm going to do, probably cut off a 1/2 inch or so. These are just really rough lines. So everything we're doing now is going to be oversized from final dimensions because we're going to be planing this down to get it nice and flat. So you just pay the lumber mill. Don't do it as S2S is surfaced on 2 sides. So they'll get one side nice and flat. They'll joint one side for you so it's a perfect 90 all the way down. Then you can use your table saw to get the other side and a thickness planer to get the 4th side.
Okay.
So we're gonna do some of that, but not all of that. All right. So what we're doing, put 2x4s under the end of it. Helps so you don't jack up your nice workbench or whatever you're cutting on. But then the problem is if you were to just cut like this with the circular saw, there's a lot of weight, especially on the length of this board, wanting to push down and pinch the blade, which causes a lot of issues. So the way to get over that is take another board. These are just support pieces on either side of where you're going to cut. So that way, when we cut that, it won't hit the bench. When we get the cut all the way through, it's got support. It falls in place instead of on the ground, jacking your saw up and everything else.
Okay.
Circular saw. It's called a circular saw.
I think we should go over the safety too before, because last time I remember when you're like,
task standard and safety.
Yeah.
Take it military training style. Alright, we'll pause for it. If you were doing just a rip through, like if I already just cut this, I could just use that line and cut straight. Because once you get the blade in a couple of inches, the blade will help keep it straight, so you're just guiding that piece. What you don't want to do is, oh, I got off, let me turn it.
Okay.
The blade is straight and doesn't like that, and it'll either kick back or it'll just bog down and lock itself in place.
Okay. Cool.
So, you always want to check the depth of your blade. I'll turn it around so you can see it. To make sure it goes through. So it's not going through now.
Okay.
So if we were to cut, like we wouldn't cut all the way through that. So.
So you put a bigger blade on there?
No, you just adjust it. So you guys can see, you've got the blade now, goes past the wood, but there's still plenty of room for the bench. This is not plugged in, that's the only reason I'm sitting my hand right there. So, safety.
Safety.
When you're holding onto the wood, Don't hold on to it like that with your fingers wrapped around because
Okay.
the blade is down there and you can't see it.
Okay, that's good advice.
You can actually see in one of the other videos, which I might pop up here, it's just a quick repetitive where I was using a miter saw and having solid mechanics when you're holding everything. You just get to where you go to the same spot every time. And as I'm going through doing all these cuts, I fast forwarded through it. And it's basically a different cut, and I'm having to move both hands and move them around, but every single cut, both my hands are in the same spot, and it looks really cool. Yeah, when we're doing this. We'll plug it in, eyes, ears, for your eye protection, ear protection stuff.
Good.
Little tip, anytime you're...
Ow!
I really hope that was on camera.
I need these down a little bit.
Anytime you're plugging something in, if you're moving around, if you're doing stuff like that, if you take the cord, wrap it around itself, you're basically creating its own knot. So now if you pull on it, it's not going to come unplugged. It's not a big deal for this, but if I were working farther away and I had to keep moving my saw and it comes unplugged, it just becomes annoying. And people tend to forget that it was on when they use it, plug it back in, and then your saw goes running down the street.
Sexy cut. Seeing the blade come from over here?
Yeah.
Man, that smells so good.
Right?
Oh man, it's just pretty heavy too.
You love it.
Actually, let me do the guard thing. Okay. I just don't want to mess it up. Eyes and ears are on. So I just push the button and I just push it that way.
Pull the button, hold it down. Before I forget, this is probably the biggest safety thing. You don't pull the trigger.
I won't. Never put
finger
your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to shoot.
You never want to have the blade against the wood when you start.
Okay.
It will jump and fly across the room and kick back and do all
that
kinds
is
of stuff you don't want to do.
Good tip.
So always bring it back.
I'm so nervous.
I'm just kidding, you're fine.
Okay, ready? I'm afraid I'm gonna cut your
You're kind of
table.
short. This would probably be easier if you were taller. Do you have something to stand on?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay. Well, it looks really cool on the inside right here.
Yeah. Do you know what this part is called?
I do not.
Grain wise, this is end grain.
End grain.
Base grain, end grain. So when you hear like an end grain cutting board,
Oh, Jesus. Base grain, end grain?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I can get you something to stand on if you want.
Sure, I'll take some.
Always be conscious anytime you're doing stuff like this, moving things around, that your cables aren't in the way.
Okay.
'Cause if that were there and you're standing on it, moving around, you go to step and trip on it. I like to do almost like dry runs,
Is
like
this how you
figure out
live your life, bro?
what.
This tall?
You know, I can grab another one and you can see.
A whole new world, dude. I mean,
I always like to, as I'm setting, I'm trying to figure out mentally like what I'm gonna do, figure out where the cords are, figure out if anything's gonna be in the way. Because if this were out here and you're like trying to move, okay, well that's in the way. Let's move that. This is okay. Okay, we're good. Cords in there, so we're fine. Everything's good.
all right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Eyes, ears.
Eyes and ears. Ow!
So,
I wasn't even near you.
okay.
You're so tall.
I know, dude. This is like weird. How is it doing that?
Because you're stopping right there. You want to keep going all the way through.
I was trying to push all the way through, but it like stops. It's annoying. Okay.
You literally, can you reach over or see this? Like that's all you're doing. So you're getting to the last little bit of cut, and you're stopping. You're like,
This looks fancy. What's this?
that wasn't staged. This is dirty. It's called a box planer, thickness planer. Basically what it does is as you put the wood through, it gives it a uniform thickness. So if you have any kind,
Ooh.
that was loud. If you have any kind of twist, which you can find by pushing on different corners. So there's a little tiny bit, nothing I'm gonna worry about with that one. See if we can find a good one. This board was pretty flat, so there's a little bit of movement there that we might. That side's a lot better, so we'll probably use that side. And you can see that's like movement. So it's not gonna fix that in a longer board because there's rollers in there. There's a roller, blade, and a roller. So the first roller will push down the board, the blade cuts, and the second roller has it. So if you have any kind of twist, it'll push down here to lift that side up, and then as it comes, it'll actually roll and do this side. So it's not gonna fix twist. There's a couple of ways you can kind of fix that, but your best bet is figure out what the flattest side is. We just have a low point over here. So we know this piece is good. The work surface I know is that's already there. The work surface, the workbench I know is dead flat. So maybe we'll shim those two a little bit, but we're gonna put this one first, just so you can see how it works.
Yeah. This one is like an easy bake oven almost. Bug. And this is making it smoother on top?
Yeah, this is gonna make it the same thickness across the top, and then it'll take the roughness off, and most of the roughness is off all the way across. We know we're done. We should hopefully have a flat surface at that point. We'll test it again.
Okay.
Flip it over to the other side.
Okay.
So this is before the first pass, just skipped plane from the mill.
Okay.
So the first couple passes probably won't grab anything. We'll go down a turn. Each turn on this is a 1/16 of an inch.
Okay.
So I'll probably go down the whole turn until it grabs, and then we'll start going like half turns.
Okay.
And it just barely skimmed the edge of this.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna go down a half turn now. So this is after the first pass. You can see on the edge and then a little bit here.
Jeez, dude, that is so crazy.
But it's nice and smooth now. It's and I just rotated these blades, so it's a nice, fresh cutting surface.
Oh yeah, dude, that looks so good.
It should. There's no movement at all, which is perfect.
Yeah.
So it's nice and flat, which we were hoping we would get, because the other side was relatively flat. There was a little bit of curve, but when we first started cutting, it was just cutting the edge. It took that out.
Okay.
So now this is dead flat. Same thickness, won't really cut anything. I did a quarter turn on the last one, so I'm going to do a quarter turn on the first one for this side and see what it does. So it'll take these lines off. If you've put a picture up over here, but if you have a chip or any kind of blemish in your blade, you actually get lines moving across the board, which is what this is. The mill, whenever they skip planed it, had probably an old dull blade or a chip in it or something. They've got their really nice finishing ones. This is just to rough out the lumber.
Oh, okay.
And I used to have that on the back side of these blades, but I rotated them around. There's a video up here if you want to see how to do that. And we'll keep going. So I got a quarter turn to start, and we'll go from there. And all I really do, if you listen to the machine as it goes through, you can actually, did you hear the difference?
Yeah.
So when it's just skimming the outer pieces of it, you can go like a half turn at a time, it'll be just fine. Once it started grabbing almost the whole piece, which was, it was just the first part of it and the last part of it that had anything else had to go, to save your motor so it doesn't bog down as much as when I start going a quarter turn, especially on a hardwood wood like this. Just keeps it nice and smooth and a nice even cut.
Okay.
So. So we've got a nice smooth side and we've got an even thickness across the whole board. So now we just gotta get the edges to 90. So this is a table saw. It's a table and it's got a saw in it.
That's, the name fits it perfect.
Sorry. It was non-intentional, I promise. Alright. Alright. So generally there's a guard on here. Flies?
Yeah, dude.
They're aggressive.
Dude, it's like this one that's been like taunting me this entire time.
I call him Fred.
Fred's about to get messed up and he, okay, sorry. Anyways, go ahead.
You can really see the wood though. I love the slits and the...
It's seriously, it's so pretty.
The whole board should look like that. Damn it, Fred!
I wanna get you,
Get out.
sucker.
Alright. So, safety stuff, we're not plugged in yet. You good?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm listening. I'm listening,
Okay.
dude. We're not plugged in yet, safety stuff.
So safety for a table saw. You can get some really bad kickback on a table saw if you don't do stuff appropriately.
So rude. Hi.
So on this side. So what I do, it's wide enough, you don't have to be a big deal, but just like when you're cutting, you don't want your thumb out. So anytime you're doing stuff, keep your thumb in. If you want to be up here, make sure your thumb is well away from the blade. So I'll be over here, and what I'm doing with this hand is just ever so slightly pushing against this fence and forward.
Okay.
Most of the forward movement's going to come from this back hand. I'm going to push through, and you need to follow through. So when you're done, you need to go all the way through.
Okay, and then I'll
That
be
is
back there.
really
That's
nice
it.
in that sun.
I know, right? It looks really good.
And it turns it on. So then as I go forward, I'm making sure, because that first part, just like before, that first part you can get a lot of movement. So you want to keep it all the way against that board. It'll be easier for you because you'll have a nice edge to go off of. Bring it in just the width of the blade again and go again. So again, I'm holding up with this, and when I start, just because I know I can do it straight, I'll actually use my hips to start pushing it. So, if we were to put it through again without moving, it shouldn't really cut anything off, but that first pass we're gonna do anyways, without moving it. So you wanna keep this, now you got a nice flat piece, keep it against the fence, and we'll just shave off. It probably won't cut much, but it'll get it started. So, just like with the circular saw, never have your piece up against it, always have your piece back. I always rest it down so I know it's not gonna touch it. Alright, so hopefully I picked that up on the camera. It actually started kicking out some sawdust because it was just barely skimming this last little part, which is why I always like to, when I turn it over, not move the fence. Because it gives if there is anything out there, it just shaves it off and makes it nice and smooth.
Okay.
So all we're gonna do now, move in another 1/16 of an inch, which is just the width of the blade. Go again.
Oh, Fred, dude.
We went from rough sawn to dimension lumber.
Yeah, that was like pretty cool, like watching the transformation and all that stuff.
Let's see it. Fred, he's a bastard, I'm telling you. So that's how you go with a lot of noise in the background from rough sawn lumber to dimension lumber. If you like what you saw, subscribe, the red button below. And I don't think we introduced you earlier. This is Deshelle. She was Air Force. She's a buddy of mine from work. And you'll probably see her on some future projects because she's trying to learn how to do some, I wouldn't call them basic woodworking skills, but you're, you know,
Just
intermediate.
learning how to do stuff. Yeah.
So,
Ryan's helping me out with that.
so you go from this rough sawn, skip plane, just rough lumber, and just a few steps, you end up getting nice, smooth dimensioned lumber, nice square sides, something that's easy to work on your tools.